I've been playing Assassin's Creed since the original game dropped back in 2007. Through the highs of the Ezio trilogy and the lows of Unity's buggy launch, I've stuck with the series. So when Ubisoft announced we were finally getting the long-requested Japan setting, I was genuinely hyped. After sinking over 50 hours into Assassin's Creed Shadows, I've got thoughts. Many thoughts. Let me cut straight to it. Assassin's Creed Shadows is undeniably gorgeous, but painfully boring. And that hurts to say. I'll start with the good stuff, because credit where it's due. 1579 feudal Japan is stunningly recreated here. The first time I approached a Shinto shrine with its vibrant red torii gates and meticulously manicured grounds, I actually gasped. The changing seasons dramatically transform the landscape. Spring rains create muddy paths and lush greenery, while winter blankets everything in pristine snow that crunches realistically underfoot. The attention to historical detail is impressive too. Pagodas and temples to the landscape with architectural precision. Warriors sport historically accurate armor. Small villages and bustling towns each have their own distinct character. My PS5 storage is now stuffed with screenshots of jaw-dropping vistas and sunsets that I couldn't resist capturing. The sound design deserves special mention. Playing in immersive mode with Japanese dialogue, mixed with some Portuguese, was absolutely the way to go. The voice acting in this mode is stellar and adds immeasurably to the atmosphere. By contrast, the English voice acting ranges from decent to downright wooden, especially for many supporting characters who deliver lines with all the emotion of a GPS navigation system. The soundtrack weaves traditional Japanese instruments with modern influences, creating a sonic landscape that somehow feels both authentic and contemporary. It's one of the few elements that consistently impressed me throughout my playthrough. But here's where things start falling apart. This gorgeous world, it's mostly just window dressing for an experience that quickly becomes mind-numbingly repetitive. Shadows introduces a dual protagonist system featuring Neo, a shinobi seeking revenge for her father's death, and Yasuke, the historical African samurai who served Oda Nobunaga. On paper, this sounds amazing: stealth gameplay with Neo, brutal combat with Yasuke. The reality? It's a frustrating mess of character switching and limitations. For starters, you're locked into playing as Neo for the first 10+ hours after a brief introduction. By the time Yasuke becomes regularly playable, you're so accustomed to Neo's mobility and stealth skills that Yasuke feels like you're controlling a tank through a china shop. He can barely climb anything. Need to scale that building? Sorry, gotta switch to Neo. Need to break through that barricaded door? Switch to Yasuke. Each character switch requires a loading screen, 5 to 10 seconds on PS5, which doesn't sound like much until you're doing it constantly. It completely breaks the flow of exploration and adds tedium where none existed in previous AC games. I found myself playing as Neo about 90% of the time simply because her mobility made traversal less frustrating, only switching to Yasuke when the game forced me to or when I knew I'd be facing numerous enemies. Remember Assassin's Creed Syndicate with Jacob and Evie Fry? At least both could parkour and perform basic assassinations. Here, the characters feel deliberately handicapped to force the switching mechanic, and it's just not fun. If you've played any recent Assassin's Creed game, you know the drill. Infiltrate enemy base, take out guards stealthily, accomplish objective. Shadows doesn't innovate on this formula. It just asks you to do it over and over and over again. Yes, there are some new toys. Neo has kunai, smoke bombs, and shuriken. She can extinguish candles to create more shadows or use the weather to mask her movements. But these additions don't fundamentally change the gameplay loop that's been present for over a decade now. Combat feels equally unchanged. You'll mash attack buttons, occasionally dodge or parry a telegraph strike, and repeat until everything's dead. Enemies are even spongier this time, thanks to armor systems that require you to break through before dealing actual damage. Exciting stuff? Not really. The worst offender has to be the mission structure. I lost count of how many times I had to slowly follow an NPC while they droned on with exposition, or how many fetch quests had me traipsing across the map for items that meant nothing to me, or how many go here, kill this person objectives blended together in my memory. And just when you think a quest is wrapping up, surprise, here are 3 more sub-objectives to complete first. It's padding of the most transparent kind. Here's where Shadows really lost me. The game employs aggressive level gating that constantly forces you to grind side content before you can progress the main story. And this side content? It's mind-numbingly repetitive. You'll find yourself visiting dozens of identical-feeling Shinto shrines, hunting for scrolls that grant knowledge points, or completing mini-games that feel like they belong in a mobile game rather than a AAA title. I'm still baffled by who thought rhythm-based quick-time events belonged in an Assassin's Creed game in 2025. The map is massive, but traversing it quickly becomes a chore. The game actually warns you that Japanese forests and mountains are difficult to navigate, so stick to the paths. While historically accurate, it's terrible game design. Being forced to follow winding roads rather than taking a direct route across the landscape feels like the game is actively wasting your time. Sometimes objectives are buried deep in areas the game just told you to avoid, leading to frustrating scenarios where you're trying to figure out how to reach a quest marker that seems deliberately placed to be annoying. In one particularly maddening instance, I spent an hour trying to reach an objective marker on a mountainside before giving up entirely. That's not a challenging puzzle, that's poor design. The leveling system feels stingy too. Missions have recommended levels, but the game often lies about your readiness. I can't count how many times I entered a black, supposedly doable, mission only to encounter enemies that could one-shot me halfway through. The solution? More grinding of tedious side content, or surprise, spending real money in the marketplace for XP boosts or resources. In a single-player game. In 2025. Really? Ubisoft? With gameplay this repetitive, you'd hope the story would provide motivation to push through. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The revenge tale at the heart of Shadows has moments of interest, particularly Yasuke's story as an outsider in Japan, but these moments are few and far between, buried under hours of gameplay. The game presents you with 16 targets to eliminate, but most have minimal narrative presence. You track them down, kill them in a boss fight that feels identical to the last one, and move on. Occasionally, the game presents moral choices, but these rarely matter and often lead to the same outcome regardless. The game even includes a canon mode that auto-selects dialogue choices, essentially admitting that your input doesn't really matter. And after 50+ hours of gameplay, the story just ends, with nothing resolved. Major plot points remain unexplained, character arcs feel incomplete, and the connections to the broader Assassin's Creed lore are tenuous at best. It feels like the entire game was set up for a sequel that may never come. After finishing Assassin's Creed Shadows, I'm left with a sense of disappointment that's hard to shake. This was supposed to be the game that got Ubisoft back on track after years of declining quality and company turmoil. Instead, it's yet another bloated entry that prioritizes a huge map over meaningful content. Yes, it's beautiful. The art team deserves all the praise in the world for creating such a stunning recreation of feudal Japan. But pretty scenery can't save a game that fundamentally isn't fun to play. What's most frustrating is that there's a good game buried somewhere in here. When Shadows focuses on its strengths, stealth infiltration, historical settings, character-driven moments, you get glimpses of what could have been. But those moments are diluted by hours of repetitive gameplay, forced grinding, and a story that ultimately goes nowhere. If you're a diehard Assassin's Creed fan who's always dreamed of a Japan setting, you might find enough here to justify the purchase. For everyone else? There are better open-world games set in Japan that respect your time far more than this one does. Ubisoft needs to seriously rethink the direction of this franchise. More isn't always better, and Shadows proves that even the most requested setting can't save a game built on tired foundations. After 17 years, Assassin's Creed needs innovation, not iteration. And sadly, Shadows offers very little of the former and far too much of the latter.